Hello again, fight fans. Welcome back to our video series with Dr. Margaret Goodman, founder of VADA. This is part 4 in our 5-video series of our interview with her. And in this section, we talk about the WBC's clean boxing program, some of the specifics behind that. We really start getting into the nitty-gritty of VADA's testing process, how all that starts, the chain of custody of the actual test specimen, how that gets from the fighter, how it's taken from them, how it gets to the lab, and how it ultimately gets reported back to VADA, and then reported back to the fighter, to the commission, to all the parties involved. We talk about the doping collection agency, Claridium, which is located in Denmark, and their doping control officers, who are all WADA accredited, and the entire process around that, which the fighters themselves are educated on and sign off on everything every step of the way. So again, this is part 4 of our 5-video series. I hope you all enjoy it. It seems to be becoming bigger and bigger, and you guys now are partnered with the World Boxing Council, the WBC, through their clean boxing program. Can we talk real quickly just about how that came about, and then we can maybe talk about some of the specifics of that program and how that's different than your program you do for a specific fight?
Well, let me say one thing, because this recently came up, and I hate to use the word partnered, because really what we are administering their program for them.
Corrected me again. No, but you're right. You're absolutely right.
Because they're separate from us and we're separate from them. We're separate. One of the great things about VADA, and this was the most important thing that I knew because I had been with the commission and understood conflicts of interest and the importance of that, is that we are separate from everyone. We are separate from anything to do with anti-doping itself. We are our own entity. We're separate from commissions, we're separate from promoters, we're separate from fighters. So that is really important. That helps us maintain that free of conflict aspect. That's really important in this sport, because you and I well know, if I see, and I go to, I'm affiliated or on the board of an organization called the Association of Ringside Physicians. And we have a yearly convention and we talk about different issues, and it's such an important organization. And it just kills me when I see ring physicians taking pictures with fighters. And I'm like, how could you possibly take a picture with that fighter, then go work that fighter's fight, and the opponent of that fighter, who you've never taken a picture from, never met, thinks that you're free of conflict or don't have some kind of relationship with that. You know, one of the things we established, and this is beyond your scope, I'm sure, is one of the things that Dr. Homansky and I helped establish in the state of Nevada was that the ringside physician is not allowed, except under an emergency circumstance, to have any contact with an athlete, a trainer, promoter, etc., unless it's related to a specific fight that's happening, and it has to be declared. Because otherwise that possible conflict could be, even, it's a perception of a conflict.
Absolutely.
There may be absolutely none. And I remember it was the hardest thing for people to understand. So I think that that's one of the best things about VADA, is that we are free of all of that and we maintain that. And that's one of the most important things for us to stay as an organization and do our job. So anyway, back to your thing. The WBC, we're so happy to work with them because Mauricio Suleiman, who I think actually his dad before him really understood that performance-enhancing drugs were a problem and understood that there was a lack of uniformity. And one thing that's interesting about a sanctioning body, whatever anyone's opinions about sanctioning bodies, is they're worldwide. You know, unlike these athletic commissions in the United States that just look at what goes on in the United States or in Canada, this is a worldwide sport. You yourself mentioned that. So one thing that Mauricio Suleiman and the board of the WBC has created, and Luis Escalona, who administers the program for the WBC itself, understood that it was necessary to look at this from a worldwide perspective and to create this uniformity. So that's one thing that we're so glad to be working with them on this.
And you guys, with the clean boxing program, you administer the testing, of course, but you determine when the tests happen and everything, right? So that basically the WBC, it's their rated fighters that are in the program, and they leave everything else up to you.
Everything else. They have no involvement. No one has any involvement. No promoter, no fighter, no manager, no trainer, no commission has anything to do with when we go test. We make those determinations ourselves. Now, we're often asked to test after a fight. That's a different issue, and we let the commission know. Matter of fact, we have a whole process that VADA goes through. So just so you know, the process that happens is, for this, like you said, for the WBC program, all they do is they give us a budget to work with. That may vary from month to month, may vary from year to year, quarter to quarter, but they give us a budget to work with, and then we decide everything else. And all we do then is notify the commission, the promoter, the fighters, any of their representatives, the Association of Boxing Commissions, or whoever the commission is, if it's a fighter that's from Austria or Thailand, we recently, we let them know the results as they become available. Other than that, no one has any involvement with us. We handle it. We are the administrator, the sole administrator.
I think that's such an important distinction to make, and it's something that a lot of fans are confused about because they think the WBC dictates when the testing happens.
No.
They've handed that over to you guys, and you do it. You have a doping control officer, or a DCO, go out in the field, and they're always from a WADA accredited lab.
No, that's a difficult, I know, and all these things are difficult, but we work with our doping collection partner is the organization called Cleridium.
That's
and
right.
Like Dr. Silva mentioned, they're located in Denmark. They have doping collection officers worldwide. They have them in Russia. They have them in South America. They have them in Thailand. They have them everywhere in the United States. And so what we do, they are totally separate from us, but they are who we utilize to perform our collections, and they have WADA certified collection officers.
Okay.
And so we contract with them. What the process is, and I don't know if anybody's interested in this or not, but the process is, for example, whichever fighter, let's say for this clean boxing program, our VADA will determine which fighters we want to test and approximately when. What I do is I create a submission to the doping collection company as far as I want this fighter tested within this period of time. I give the doping collection company all of the information on where the fighter is located.
That the fighter provides to you through their
Yes.
whereabout form and all that.
Exactly.
Okay.
And soon our application that we'll have that's going to be on Android and obviously on Apple, so they can let us know for changes anytime, day or night, of where they're going to be. And then I give it to them. Then I leave it up to them. They perform the testing. They give us the doping control form. They give us the chain of custody. That's their responsibility to maintain that the specimen was collected properly according to the standards that are dictated by WADA and by our organization VADA. And then they take care of the forms. They inform the athlete. The athlete, and actually, and Dr. Silva didn't get to talk about this too much, but it's a very intricate process on testing the athlete. It's not like when I was a ring doctor, I would just go in, hold the cup, and wait for the fighter to pee in the cup.
Right.
It's a lot more involved in that, and the athlete is educated onto the doping control process. We even have, if you go on our website and also on the WBC website, you can actually see the collection process on collecting urine and collecting blood and how specific it is, and the forms that have to be done, the dates, the signatures, everything has to be sealed properly. One thing great about Cleridium and what VADA does is we use certain collection vials that are sealed and cannot be opened except by the laboratory. So they can't be tampered with. And then the doping collection company will follow that specimen. Let's say it's coming from Russia or it's coming from Costa Rica. They will follow that chain of custody of how it went through customs, how it arrived at the lab. Then that arrives at the lab. So the collection company has given me all of that information on the actual collection process.
So
okay?
everything's signed off on. You know exactly how the sample got to the lab.
Exactly, and everything was handled properly, and that the athlete has signed all of that. It's important for the athlete to know.
So they're aware of this whole process.
The athlete is educated into that whole process. Sometimes you'll see on Twitter or on Instagram, they'll post pictures, but there's a doping collection officer that sits with them no matter how long it takes to explain this process to them. And so then what happens is once the collection hits the lab will also will notify, and this is not just with VADA, with any organization, if it arrived intact, that it was never possibly tampered with. And then they will process that. And then there's a whole several-day process that the lab goes through. It's fascinating what these anti-doping labs do. And how you are aware of this is if there should be a positive or an adverse analytical finding or atypical finding, then the lab contacts me immediately, and then I don't know, and the lab doesn't know who the athlete, who that was. They have no idea. Neither do I. But what I have to do then is go back through the doping control forms to match the numbers with the numbers from the lab so that I can put it together to know who it was. So everyone is blinded as best as possible so that there's no conflict of interest, no favoritism on any part of anyone.
That's another important distinction to make. There's basically a number that on the form and
Yes.
everything from there. So it's totally anonymous through the entire chain of command until the lab and through the testing and then contacting you.
So the athlete's name is on those doping control forms, but the lab does not get that.
Okay, gotcha.
So they don't know. And then when it comes to me, I don't initially know, hopefully in a few minutes I know, but I don't always know who it is right away. I have to put those two things together and match them. And then what happens is then VADA goes through to make sure the chain of custody was perfect, the forms are perfect, everything was perfect at the lab before we report a result, and I share it with our scientific advisor, Dr. Catlin, who says yes or no, because you hate to think of things in a legal term, but you have to know that, number one, you don't want to accuse an athlete if something can't be defended, not just in a court of law, but defended as far as an anti-doping violation. So, or a doping violation, excuse me. So you have to make sure that that was done appropriately. Interestingly enough, if there is a possible doping violation, I think we've talked about this before, they can ask to have the B sample. Well, the B sample was taken at the exact same time as the A sample, so it's
right.
almost impossible. I think there have been a few instances in the world, not with us, but in the world where the B sample wasn't positive, but like the A sample. But the lab will produce something called a documentation package. The documentation package can be anywhere from 30 to 80 pages long of exactly what that collection went through at the lab, who touched it, what time it was touched, what it was tested for, and then what happens, then the lab sends me a report of exactly the test that we ordered and what those results were.
So you have complete transparency through that whole process.
Has to be.
And your testing is the same every time, like we talked about before with the carbon isotope test, which now is, I can't remember the new name.
That's
but
all right.
That's every time. You're testing for that.
Every time.